I received a request to review my 35mm APO-Summicron lens on my Leica MP. So here it is. I took out my new lens on the Leica MP to test it out and see how it would look on film. And as a bonus, I also had an old roll of film that I hadn't developed yet, and half of that roll had the images from my New York trip back in July. So I'll post those results here also for the first time, and that was using my 35mm Summilux lens. So we'll get a chance to compare the 35 APO-Summicron with the 35mm Summilux, both on the Leica MP. It was a sunny afternoon, and Portra 800 was not the best choice, but I was running low on film, and it was either this or black and white film. So I kept the shutter speed at the maximum 1000 and I adjusted the aperture, but I still had to stop down, mostly down to f8 or f11. And I actually liked the composition of this photo, and the exposure was good, although I could have stepped in a little bit closer. The colors on the APO-Summicron do seem a little bit washed out. I never edit my film photos, so straight out of the camera, the colors do seem a little bit pale. But the images themselves do look lifelike, and the sharpness is good. I did struggle with the lighting in this photo, with the very bright sun in the middle and the dark shadow in the foreground. Normally I could fix this very easily on a digital photo, but again on my analog photos I don't like to edit. So on my Leica MP, I think I just have to stay away from very high contrast scenes like this. I think this is the first time using the Portra 800. I don't remember using this before. And I do like the color tones that come out with this film. Very lifelike and not overly warm like Kodak Gold. It's more closer to Fujifilm 400. Coming up to some food trucks and fruit and vegetable stands, so I'll try to get in some closer shots and fit in some people in the shots. The 35mm focal length gives you a good overview of the scene, and 35 is becoming my favorite focal length, and I think 28 is just too wide, and that makes it difficult to make a good composition. But with 35, you do need to step up pretty close to get close-up images of objects or people. I'm still reluctant to get too close up to people, so most of these shots were taken from too far away. But I do want to include more people in my photos, so that's part of the reason why I got the Leica Q3-43, and I'll be experimenting more with my 50mm APO-Summicron lens. I think this might be my favorite image from the afternoon. But even with all the failed shots, it's still very fun to shoot analog, especially with the Leica MP. It feels so good in the hand, so compact and dense, and I like all that tactile feedback from the shutter button, the aperture ring, and the shutter speed dial. Out of all my cameras, this feels the best to shoot with, way better than the Q3 and even better than the M11. But let's take this out to the lake and see how it handles the fall colors. And again, I think the colors here look good, a little bit pale, but pretty accurate. And outdoors, this film still has some of that vintage character. And now on to my last roll of film for my New York City trip, way back at the end of July. I almost forgot that half of this roll had my New York City photos, so I didn't rush to get this developed. I was just waiting to finish off the rest of this roll and shoot another roll so I could send both in at the same time to get developed. But it was so long ago, I forgot which type of film I was using, so I apologize, I can't tell you what type of film stock this was. But I was using the 35mm Summilux FLE2, a lens which I have since sold. But this does give me the chance to compare the 35 APO-Summicron with the 35 Summilux FLE, both on the Leica MP. For some reason, I like the composition on this photo, the street signs, the one-way signs, and the sign on the building and the traffic light. And then I have just a couple snapshots of some billboards and one of a normal street scene. New York City is the best city in the world for street photography. I think Tokyo would be nice too, but I've never been there. But I am traveling to Europe next spring, so that'll be nice to take some photos there. But New York City is great. So many scenes on the street, and the people don't ever mind if you take their picture. And also plenty of buildings and architecture to take pictures of. I'm sitting down in Washington Square Park, taking some photos of people walking by, and I think I'm just using this camera from my lab. And here I think 35 was just too wide, and a 50 or 75 would have worked better for this shot. But I did step up pretty close here, and I was surprised by how I could fill up the frame. So far I've been stopping down with the 35 Summilux also, so I haven't been seeing much difference between the Summilux and the APO-Summicron. Next is a weird architecture shot, and some more photos of people on the street. I think because of the high shutter speed, these images were not blurry. I think this photo might be my favorite of the day. The woman in the foreground, the street in the background, and the crosswalk. As I was saying, in terms of film photography, I don't think the choice of lens is the major factor in determining how the images come out, like it is on digital. I'm shooting with the 35 Summilux, and the results are pretty much very similar to the 35 APO-Summicron in terms of clarity and sharpness. So the major factor in film photography is what type of film stock you choose to use. I wish I could remember which film stock this was, but I'm guessing it was either Portra 400 or Fujifilm 400. So both of these lenses, the 35 APO-Summicron and the 35 Summilux, were just way too overpowered for film photography. You really don't need that extra resolving power on film. And normally I shoot stop down anyway, and I don't need that extra light stop to get the separation. But I'm still glad I sold the Summilux and got the APO-Summicron because I can use that APO-Summicron on my M11. And I'm also glad that I sold my 28mm Summilux because I can use my 28mm Elmarit on my Leica MP and get pretty much similar results. And the 28mm Elmarit is so super small and compact, and it's easy to use on the Leica MP. But the 28 is still a little bit too wide for me, so I prefer 35. But I am using my 50 also, so maybe next time I'll do a review of my 50 APO-Summicron on the Leica MP.